You tune in to the public interest. Welcome. This is a program that allows for open and frank discussions on matters of national importance. As always, we have with us Guyana's Head of State, President David Granger. And joining us today are two persons from the media that needs no introduction, Mr. Enrico Woolford of Capital News and Ms. Radha Motielall from the National Communications Network. Welcome to you both.
Thank you very much.
We're going to open today's discussion by focusing a little on microenterprise development. This is a key focus of this year's Gaia Expo, Mr. President, which is slated for May 12th, sorry. In fact, the theme is Guyana means business promoting enterprise driving productivity. Mr. President, what is your government doing to create the right environment to facilitate small and medium scale enterprises?
Well, to start with, it's not just a matter for Gaia Expo. It is something that we have put forward from the time of our campaign in our manifesto. We feel that we could encourage employment in the villages, in the hinterland and rural areas through microenterprise. So it is something that is more pervasive than just Gaia Expo. What we're doing is that we're encouraging young people, particularly school leavers, to go into these enterprises, and we hope to use a model like LEN so that persons could access capital. We can provide extension services and ensure that assistance is provided for them to get markets, so that in a small way, bottling, packaging, processing foods, instead of trying to export, breadfruit or cassava, make breadfruit chips or cassava chips to put into our fast food shops, into our fish and chip shops. And in that way, we'd encourage employment, and at the same time, we generate production. So this is the direction we're traveling in, particularly for young people and women who want to access capital. We feel that the micro finance institutions would be pivotal in helping to create this core of micro entrepreneurs, if I can call it that.
Thank you, sir. Your questions?
Mr. President, if I could, with regard to business, bringing business to the country, one of the problems with one of the challenges with bringing business is a perception that there is corruption in the system, that you have to know somebody inside. The GRA isn't working properly, this place isn't working properly. What are the mechanisms you've put in place to ensure that issues of corruption and transparency are dealt with?
Well, apart from the law, we have attempted to introduce and promote and appoint persons to office who could ensure that their enterprises are administered in an honest and efficient way. We are reforming the Guyana Police Force. We introduced two new agencies, the SOCU and SARU, one dealing with recovery of state assets and one dealing with investigation of white-collar crimes. We are going to improve our compliance with money laundering legislation, and the police force is going to strengthen its fraud squad. So in these ways, we expect that there is going to be greater vigilance. We know that corruption, I would say, under the last administration was quite pervasive in the forestry sector, mining sector, even wildlife. Quite recently, I had a discussion with the Minister of Natural Resources to ensure that all of these agencies are given enforcement arms, so that if a forestry officer or a mines officer or a revenue officer attempts to be corrupt, it could be detected much more quickly, and an end could be put to that corruption. We also look at the Police Complaints Authority and the Office of Professional Responsibility. Even there we had some fraud. And we are tightening up on those organs so that persons in uniform who commit these offenses could be brought to justice. It's going to take a bit of time, but we are working through the Ministry of Public Security to improve the enforcement arms of the state. And we feel that with better enforcement, the laws are there, with better enforcement, we'll be able to curb corruption, at least curb graft. But it takes two to tango. And what happens most frequently? There are corrupt business persons who try to induce members of the government to do illegal acts. So we need not only to ensure that there's a clean public service, but also to make sure that businessmen who try to corrupt public servants, police officers, revenue officers, are also brought to justice.
I know you've spoken extensively on the issue within your own ministry where Minister of State Joe Harmon has been perceived as doing a corrupt act because of what some say is political patronage. Do you consider political patronage as part of the whole corruption scenario? Because that sends a message to younger people that you've got to literally know somebody and get something.
I don't think there's a quid pro quo. I don't think that business persons or any person should be able to buy political favor or political patronage. I would expect that in the fullness of time that would be diminished and decisions would be made purely on the basis of objective criteria. That is, if 4 persons or 6 persons apply for a position, people should be judged by their merit. I don't think a person should be appointed because he's a friend of a politician or he's done a political favor.
On the issue of business in Guyana, and more so the community level, one of the hindrances continues to be reliable power supply and cheap power supply. Could you say where is the government's effort in terms of pursuing alternative energy, and if there is a thought given to maybe incentivize self-generation for us to set up like a small enterprise and put in a generator in the meanwhile as a temporary measure?
Well, by this time, within a year of being in office, we had hoped that maybe Bartica could have been a model green town, displaying the various types of renewable energy, wind power, solar power, biogas, and maybe water power, and there are like 100 sites in Guyana that could generate some form of hydropower. I must admit that we have not gone very far. We have had a lot of samples, we've had a lot of visitors, but we are still committed to those varieties of sustainable or renewable energy generation. And I'm a bit disappointed there because at this point in time we should have been able to, for example, have more wind chargers, particularly along the coast and in the hinterland. We're still too reliant. In fact, we're addicted to oil. And I think that has been part of our downfall. So, yes, we need to do more for energy, and we would like to see a lot more wind farms. We'd like to see solar farms. Instead of giving out these small solar panels like Christmas toys, we'd like to see huge farms powering whole communities. But we are a little way away from that objective at the present time.
In terms of business, Mr. President, if I could go back just a little with regard to the honorific, as they say, appointment of Mr. Tiwari as a business advisor. You rescinded that appointment, but then you said something that is interesting. You said that the Minister of Business doesn't need advisors. Is that what you said, and is that what you really meant?
I did not need. I said I'm satisfied with the Minister of Business, and I did not need to have Mr. Tiwari as a business advisor to me. I get my business advice from the Minister of Business.
And from whom does he get his advice?
Well, he doesn't need to get the advice from Mr. Tiwari.
So he has a set of advisors.
That's right, yeah, within his ministry.
Why I'm asking that is because I got a call with regard to the Diaspora Development Program, and some persons who called me were saying, look, the government said that they were going to promote business with the diaspora and what have you. What has happened?
What happened, if you were trying to draw a relationship between the issuance of that certificate and the diaspora, that is where the idea originated. There were people in the diaspora who supported the campaign, and at the end of the campaign, there was a clamor for recognition for their contribution, and that is when the certificate was invented. And nearly 3 dozen were given out, and that is why the term honorific was used, because it was simply a certificate honoring them for their contribution. I cannot say that they constituted an advisory panel. It is ad hoc. These were people I met in Toronto. These are people I met in Queens, in New York, and in Florida. And they wanted to be recognized for their contribution. And the demand came from members of both the Alliance for Change and the Partnership for National Unity. I said over 3 dozen certificates were issued. I don't see it as a corrupt practice, and the word honorific is not misplaced in that regard.
But then it was for a political party, helping a political party, as against helping a government.
Exactly.
But it was issued by the government.
Yes.
So why don't you think there's a difference between the party and the government?
Well, what I'm saying, I'm agreeing that these awards were honorific, and they were not meant to influence government policy. And as far as I can see, they did not have a role in directing government. They're not employees of the government. But these were people, when a minister, the Minister of Business or the Prime Minister or I go to visit Toronto, many businessmen come to see us. And those persons who have participated in the campaign have functioned, have worked as facilitators. We don't have a foreign service that could sit down and take account of everyone who wants to see us. I've been in situations in Toronto in which, I was in one room and people were literally queuing up in the same room to present business proposals and plans and to seek opportunities for investment in Guyana. In fact, when I came back, I had to ask the Minister of Business to go to Toronto to help to interview the persons who wanted to see us. So what we see happening is that persons who were politically engaged in the campaign were used as ad hoc facilitators. And that is why we use the expression honorific. They're not employees, and they're not meant to be full-time advisors to the Minister of Business. But it's not something I can cope with. It's something that exists within the Minister of Business when we go to these metropolitan communities.
For the development of business in the country, however, you are working with the diaspora. You have a system in place, mechanisms in place to do that?
We have procedures. I wouldn't call it a system. Minister of Business actually went up after my visit, I think it might have been last September, and held discussions, and there is correspondence between business and the diaspora, both in Canada and in the United States. So it is a continuing process.
Ms. Motielall?
Mr. President, I want to raise another issue. Recently, there's been a lot of published stories about the apparent rift in the coalition in terms of the statements issued recently by the AFC. Do you believe that as a coalition, these matters would have been better dealt with and served in-house, probably at the level of cabinet, as opposed to going public first?
Oh, well, the cabinet is not the place for that. The cabinet is the place for government business. We have had encounters between the APNU and AFC before, and I would agree with you that within a coalition, it's a 6-party coalition. People seem to run away with the idea it's a 2-party coalition. And parties have their own interests, and they've brought those interests into the coalition. I'm not afraid of debate or discussion, and from time to time, parties make releases to the media or to the public. As president, I can't control that, those releases, and they're free to do so. But in the long term, at a strategic level, I'm convinced that all 6 parties are committed to the coalition, and they want to see the coalition have a successful tenure of office as we go to the next election. But I don't think that what occurred is necessarily a sign of any form of antagonism. I don't think it's harmful to the coalition. It's healthy debate. So we will continue to have the freedom of expression. I'm leader of the People's National Congress, and we have had discussions on a variety of issues, the Walter Rodney Commission inquiry. Every issue, up to last night, I attended the Central Executive Committee of my party, and we discussed, all of these matters.
Speaking about the coalition's success, you're about to mark 1 year in office. How satisfied are you with the delivery of the various ministers and ministries? As well, can we expect maybe as you cross the threshold of the 1 year, some changes in the cabinet?
I've already made some minor changes, and any prudent leader, any prudent president will continue to evaluate the performance of the entire cabinet and, of course, the individual performance of ministers, and do whatever is necessary to ensure that people are correctly placed and correctly, tasked. Up to the present time, I'm satisfied that given the constraints, given the conditions that we found when we entered office last year in May, I think we're doing quite well.
Just a quick follow-up. There are suggestions that there's probably a need for a junior or minister within the Ministry of Agriculture to support Mr. Holder, given the scale of that ministry. Do you share that view?
Minister Holder has not made that request to me. Sometimes you have letters to the editor, but policy is not determined there. And if Minister Holder wanted assistance, he is free to approach me. As you know, he is nominated by the Alliance for Change. And in the Commingsburg Accord, agriculture is one of the ministries that was agreed would be given to the Alliance for Change. So neither Mr. Ramjatan, the leader of the party, nor Mr. Holder has approached me on the matter. But, if there was a need, I would certainly give consideration to it. There are other ministries with junior ministers. I had deliberately tried to keep the number of portfolios or ministries down, and there are now 15, well, 14 line ministries and a ministry of the presidency. I do not want to have more new ministries, but as you say, there might be need, or there might be a possibility of having a minister within the Ministry of Agriculture, but that need has not been articulated to me, but it's something I'm prepared to consider.
Could I just follow up something that you said with regard to Radha? You said policy is not determined by letters to the editor. Does it mean you're not listening to public opinion?
Well, I did not say that, and I did not mean that. No, I mean that when you see a letter to the editor, it does not necessarily mean that we have to go in that direction. It means that ministers could be informed, and within their parties, within the coalition, we could consider those opinions. Well, when you look at letters, there's no single source of wisdom. Letters could be written which are widely, which vary widely in terms of their recommendations, in terms of their thoughtfulness, in terms of the research. So there's no homogeneous letter to the editor, like some fountain of wisdom. People write what they feel, and we're not unaware of what they write. But what I'm saying is that no government could be swayed on a day-to-day basis by what they see in the letters column. We read considered opinion, and we naturally give weight to what we read and what is articulated to us, or what our advisors tell us. I'm not discounting the importance of letters to the editor, but as you know very well, letters may vary from day to day, even from person to person. Sometimes somebody may write a letter, next day they apologize because they made a mistake.
On the point of listening to the public, sugar workers, would you be willing to consider, as head of state, engaging sugar workers on the insecurities in the industry?
Yes.
That's it?
You asked me if I was willing, I said yes.
Well, let's follow up. Is there any such engagement being planned at this time, given the planned protests and vigil and all of that going on at Wales?
Yeah, the Minister of Agriculture has assured us that he's working on a plan, and when that plan is ready, I hope it would have been ready by now, certainly by the end of the month. I think there ought to be an engagement, a face-to-face engagement between the administration and the workers, so that any uncertainty or any anxiety could be resolved.
Mr. President, as May 26 draws closer, we're seeing an increase in private sector-led initiatives to commemorate the jubilee the 50th anniversary. Companies are branding, large companies and small companies are branding and rebranding products and even events to mark this anniversary. The other day we saw DDL launching that special edition rum. What is your take on this level of nationalism and corporate responsibility?
Well, I'm very encouraged by it. I'm glad that it is happening. I would say that over the past year, this has been one of the distinctive features of the administration and of what has been taking place in the country. People are proud. Those persons who were present in Georgetown on the 23rd of February would have seen people actually crying when they saw the flag being raised. On the 26th of May last year at the Independence Monument, there were some people who lived in lodges who said they never knew they had a monument there. But sometimes you can pass there on a Saturday afternoon, you see wedding parties taking photographs. So these are some of the symptoms of a resurgence of that patriotic spirit, the nationalistic spirit. And I'm glad that the corporate community is part of it. One corporation is going to build a replica of the Independence Arch. As you say, people are branding their products. I think Caribbean Airlines. So this is all very good, and I support the initiatives, and I think Guyana is going to be better for it. Guyanese people need to recapture that pride in their country, and all around the world you can see what national pride does in terms of sport, in terms of supporting local products, in terms of supporting each other when they travel. So this is all good for Guyana, what is happening, and I'm glad that the 50th anniversary of independence is able to capture that spirit, not only in the corporate community, but also in the villages. Even if you travel to some of the rural areas, places like Rose Hall, people still have independence arches from 1966. So we're recapturing that spirit, and I think it's a good thing.
Thank you, sir.
Well, it's a good thing to recapture the spirit. Is it a good thing to have contractors out there doing work? For example, they may be doing work at the Durban Park, or they may be doing work across the country, and one is not quite sure whether they have contracts, whether they are going to be paid, whether this is a donation or what have you. What kind of accountability you have for that eventuality?
Well, some contributions have been voluntary, and we've asked for those to be documented. There's a holding company, which is a special vehicle. I've asked the Minister of Finance to ensure that all monies received come into the public treasury, and similarly, all payments are done through the state. I don't know exactly what the apparatus or the system is, but I don't want to receive monies which cannot be accounted for. It is quite a dangerous practice. In fact, we have received donations casually, but bicycles, people have donated boats, but an account must be made of all of these donations so they don't, people don't feel that they're buying favor or patronage, as you said earlier in this press conference. So it's something to be encouraged. It's part of the corporate sense of responsibility. I certainly welcome it that we have situations in which school children are waiting at the roadside. If a businessman wants to buy a bus to donate to the region to help to get children in school, I don't think it should be discouraged.
A little before May 26, we have May 1, and after 15 plus years, we're going to have a unity rally. the two factions of the trade unions are finally coming together. But in doing so, they're also calling for a substantive labor ministry. Mr. Lewis was quoted as saying that social protection is not an element, labor is not an element of social protection, but vice versa, the other way around. Do you believe there is need for a substantive labor ministry?
If I did, I wouldn't have had it within the Ministry of Social Protection.
So you believe they're well
I think
served?
it's well placed. I
It's
think
well
it's well placed, the labor portfolio. I think the duties within the Ministry of Social Protection, the duties are clearly defined, and I made it clear why I felt that the name social protection is more appropriate. It's the protection of the workers. When a worker dies in the mines, I feel injured, and I want to see the Ministry of Social Protection protecting workers. If a worker is treated unfairly in a foreign company, a timber company or a mining company, it's social protection. So maybe Mr. Lewis and I see things differently, but I feel that the expression social protection is more complete than just Ministry of Labor. It is protecting workers. That's my concern. There are two ministries with this prefix social cohesion and social protection, and it's deliberate. I call them social deliberately. So what I want to see is the protection of workers' rights. And as far as I'm concerned, that is an appropriate title.
We have time for one more question.
I thought we had 10 minutes of questions that were free.
I think you probably had a lot of time, free time.
Mr. President, the issue of selection of persons for positions and appointments and what have you, particularly like there was an issue with regard to the city council and accusations of sexual molestation and with Ms. Lawrence and what have you. As president, have you spoken to the leader of the People's National Congress with regard to how your party will deal with Ms. Lawrence?
Well, it has been publicly announced that after the matter was brought to public attention, I asked Ms. Lawrence for an explanation of the circumstances under which Mr. Winston Harding, if that's the person you're referring to,
yes,
came to be nominated, and she did submit an explanation which was discussed at the Central Executive Committee with the PNC. You must bear in mind that one, the person who was nominated is a member of the party, and he was selected by the constituents in that area who voted for him. So it is a dilemma, I suppose, that here you have a person who is not being convicted of an offense and who was nominated by persons who know him in that community. And in fact, when the votes were shown, it was quite clear that he enjoyed the support of people in that community. So that explanation was given to the People's National Congress Central Executive Committee last night by Mrs. Lawrence.
But Mr. President, what seems to be happening is that the government seems to have condemned things in the past and now appears to be cozying up with the same things, whether it be sexual molestation, whether it'll be corruption, are these errors of judgment, or what's happening that your government appears to be what some in the public are saying, making blunders or missteps?
You asked me a specific question, I gave you a specific answer about the matter concerning the nomination of a person for the City Council. And I told you that an explanation was sought and given, and the People's National Congress Central Executive Committee is satisfied with the explanation given by Minister Lawrence.
And now I've gone to a general question.
Well, you can't always move the specific to the general. But in that case, there was a specific accusation, and to the satisfaction of the Central Executive Committee, Ms. Lawrence explained the circumstances under which that person came to be nominated.
Well, if I could go back to the general question, though. In the past, you have, there have been condemnations of Aishan Ling, there have been condemnations of how we're dealing with some issues. Why is that happening now that your government appears to be cozying up?
Well, it's difficult to answer such a broad and general question. I don't know that the government is cozying up to any illegality. I don't admit to that.
On that note, we'll have to wrap up the program. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Ms. Motielall, Mr. Woolford. Thank you, viewers, for joining us. Do join us again next week. Goodbye.